So that was a song called Tributaries that I've been working on, and I've been using some of my old gear. So my Roland TR8 drum machine, which was released I think in 2011 or 2012, is the second drum machine I owned, and I really got into it for a couple of years. It's got all the old sounds from the 808 and the 909 programmed into it, and then it has this expansion pack with the 707 and the 606, all these classic TR Roland drum machines. It's not analog, it's made up of samples, and so you had to buy the sample pack for $100 to get the expanded repertoire of sounds. Luckily, when I bought this used, it already had those sounds programmed into it, so because now I don't think you can even get the expansion pack. But the cool thing about the Roland TR8, one of the cool things, is that it has this really nice scatter effect up at the top here. So if we play this pattern and then hit the scatter, maybe put on number 7, which is one of my favorites. You can get all kinds of glitchy effects, which I know are kind of antiquated and overused, but I really like them. So I wanted to make a jam exploiting the scatter effect, but I didn't want to manually have to hit the button every time. I wanted to add the scatter effect sometimes randomly and sometimes at particular points in each pattern. And so what I did was I took my Elektron Digitakt, which has a much more sophisticated step sequencer, and I programmed a MIDI track to control certain parameters on the TR8, including the scatter and the hi-hat decay time and the hand clap tune and decay time. So these are all knobs, like the hi-hat, which is right here. Let's get a hi-hat. There's the hi-hat. And you can change the decay time, make it really short, make it really long. You can do that manually by turning the dials. There's no way to automate parameters on the TR8. What you see is what you get. There's no menu diving. If you want to change a parameter, you have to turn the knob in real time. And I like to have my hands free to do other stuff. So I used the MIDI track on the Digitakt to sequence parameter changes on the TR8. And you do that, of course, by going into the proper MIDI page, programming the numbers. So you can press these little dials and they will tell you what number is there. 68, 69, 74. 74? No, it should be 70. I think I turned that one by accident. I'm not going to save it, so when I turn the unit off, it'll revert. But 68, 69, and 70 control the scatter type and the scatter depth, and then it turns it on and off with parameter number 70 by turning it up past, I think, 60 or so. So once you have the parameters you want to control, I also programmed the decay and the hand clap decay time onto these other two parameters, 62 and 58. So basically I have 5 parameters that the Digitakt is controlling on the TR8, and once you have those set, you go to the value page. Oh, there's an extra one there. I forget. I usually make a little map for myself on a cue card to tell me which of these dials maps onto which of these controls. But I know for a fact that these three are controlling the scatter. So if we hit step 5, you'll see I've programmed a value in at step 5. 85 controls the scatter type. It'll probably make it scatter type number 8 probably. 15 is the amount, and then, or the depth of the scatter, and then 88 simply turns it on or off as long as it's past the 12 o'clock point. I think that's how it works. So that was one aspect of how this song is arranged. And the other element is that I used the drift box, which is an analog 2-voice analog synthesizer, or 2 oscillators. It's a mono synth, but it has 2 oscillators, and FM modulation can be turned on. So I just made a sound on the drift box, which is extremely difficult to program. So every time you turn it off and on, you're going to have to spend time fiddling to get the sound similar to how it sounded the last time you turned it on. But right now, if we turn off the sidechain, it's basically just this FM horn sound, and it sounds pretty bad. So if I was just playing it alongside the jam, it would sound awful. Well, maybe not quite as bad as it sounds when I'm just hitting the note. But the other thing that the TR8 allows you to do is to sidechain an external input. So I have the drift box going into the TR8 through the external in, and then it's sidechained, and there's about 8 different varieties of sidechaining. I'm using number 4. I don't know what they all are. You have to kind of try them out, and some of them have different kinds of windows, different kinds of transitions in and out of the duck. So I just found number 4 worked in this particular instance, and I programmed it on every so often. I mean, on this pattern, it's fairly regularly, every 4 steps. And that's basically it's basically cutting off the sound of the drift box in a more staccato manner than it would be without the side chaining. So let's just try this out. That's without the side chain. That's with the side chain. It just makes it into a little kind of percussive beepy noise rather than a sustained note. So the drift box is going into the TR8. The Digitakt is controlling the scatter effect and other parameters. And because the drift box is going into the TR8, the scatter is also affecting the drift box, which makes certain notes a little bit glitchy and creates some variation in the way the drift box is sounding. I also have this thing routed, so the TR8 allows you to have an external out for 2 separate channels or instruments. So I have the bass drum as one external out, and the hand clap, I believe, or is it the chime sound? I think it's the hand clap is the other external out, and that means that the bass drum and the hand clap are not captured by the scatter when it's activated. Only the sounds that are going through the main outs are affected by the scatter. So that's one way you maybe don't want the bass drum doing the scattery, glitchy effect, because that would be too much scatter. So as it is, it's really just the hi-hat and the snare drum and the hand clap, I think sometimes. This is what I'm not sure about. I can't remember what my second external out is. And to figure it out, you have to turn the machine on and off, and I don't want to do that right now. So that's one little configuration. We've got the Arteria BeatStep Pro, which is a sequencer that allows you to sequence up to 3 different pieces of gear. And the reason I busted this little baby out is because it has control voltage, which allows me to control the drift box. Drift box doesn't have a MIDI in, and the Digitakt doesn't have CV out. So whenever I want to use the drift box to do more than just send pulses, I have to use the BeatStep Pro. which I actually quite enjoy because it is not as sophisticated a sequencer as the Elektron, but it actually does a lot of things. And the pads are nice, and there is no menu diving here. You can hook it up to your computer and change some parameters that way, but in general it's a pretty solid performance sequencer. So I have the drift box being sequenced by sequencer 1. I have the Novation Peak being controlled by sequencer 2. And the thing about the BeatStep Pro is each step can only have one note. I don't, there may be a way, but I don't know how to do it, to play more than one note per step. That makes it hard to do chords. But on the Novation, there's a key latch button, which means the note will keep playing, in this case almost indefinitely. And that means that if the sequencer hits 3 different notes on 3 subsequent steps, it will play a chord. Because the old note is still on when a new note hits. So that's how we got around the limitations of the BeatStep Pro by using the Peak. The drum sequence is also sequencing the TR8, and it's just adding extra. There's certain patterns in here that have extra snares, extra hi-hats, hand clap, and the chime sound. So because the TR8 has a sort of less sophisticated sequencer, you can sequence up to 16 steps, and then there's A and B, so that gives you 32 steps per pattern. But if you want to do complicated combinations of patterns, there's no real way to do it. It'll play steps in sequence. So right now it's just playing 2 over and over again, but if I want, I can have it play 2, 3, 4, 5 over and over again, which is how this song is composed. It just keeps looping 2, 3, 4, 5, which is the same beat, over and over. But then the BeatStep Pro is adding little extra notes and extra instruments every once in a while, depending on the pattern. So you've got like added some extra hi-hats there. So that's one of the ways I got around the kind of limitations of the Roland TR8 by using a couple extra sequencers to do different things. And that's about it. I think I covered all the different angles. Oh yeah, the Novation Peak, which, is an amazing synthesizer. And one of the things that I programmed into this particular patch, here we go. So if you have key latch on them, they have these animate buttons. And the animate buttons will change a certain parameter. And in this case, it's changing the filter resonance, increasing the filter resonance, which also feeds into the delay, and which creates a kind of neat effect. So by changing the depth of that filter resonance animation, you can either get a kind of sweeping effect, or you can get more staccato delay effects. And I sort of just kept it at 12, but you could use both parameters and get the more percussive delay effect or the more sweeping filter effect. And I think that's about it for this jam. That's how it's all set up. It all goes out. All these different instruments go into my Mackie mixer, which I didn't research well enough before I got it. So what I didn't realize is that the Mackie mixer, even though it has a USB out and you can record it to your computer, it only records the main outs, and that means there's no way to do multi-track recording very easily. You could do dual track recording by panning left and right, but so with this jam I just did all the mixing on the instruments itself as much as possible, and then record the entire jam as one track in Audacity, and then I'll use that as my I'll master that. But I did try recording a version of this song where I recorded each instrument separately, and that's a hassle. It means you have to play the song 6 different times with only one instrument going through the mixer into your computer, and then you have to assemble them all in your DAW, and then you can do your mixing and your levels and all that kind of thing. But by the time I'd done all that, the song didn't actually sound as good as it did when I just simply relied on the instruments themselves to do the mixing, basically setting the levels the way I liked them up front rather than afterwards. So I don't have a lot of control over the finished product once it's recorded. I can do a little bit of mastering on the whole file, but I can't adjust the tracks because of the way this jam is set up. It's the reason I enjoy using the Elektron devices, because you can use Overbridge to do multi-track recording, but then I have limitations because of the drift box and the CV, and I wanted to use some older gear, so I think it sounds pretty good just the way it is, and I'm happy with it. I'm going to go with that. And I guess that wraps up this episode of Old Machines, New Music. Thanks for watching. If you have questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment box. And I hope I'll see you again for another episode. Have fun and make some music.